Maybe he's dead. What a terrible thing to say. Welcome to You Guys Podcast. I'm Rob, this is Liam, and this week we watched John Woo's Broken Arrow. Released in 1996, it is the second Western John Woo film following Hard Target. Broken Arrow follows two stealth pilots carrying nuclear weapons on a test run over Utah to see if you can find the radiation. I mean, yeah, sure, seems legit, but surprise, surprise, Major Vic Deacon turns out to be a villain and is trying to steal the missiles. I mean, how nobody ever thought this guy would be a villain? You just have to look at him or the way he smokes a cigarette to see he is one white pussycat away from world domination. I mean, it's up to our hero, Riley Hale. Riley, that's a strong name. It's a good name. Played by Christian Slater. It's up to him and his real-life ex-girlfriend, I bet that wasn't awkward on set, Samantha Mathis, to save the day. But first we need to release a nuclear bomb in a mine. Now, I'm no scientist, and I'm sure it's plausible, but did that seem deep enough to not have any radiation leak out? Anyway, Broken Arrow delivers once again on a John Woo promise of action, gunfights, and slow motion, with a standoff or two thrown in for good measure. But before we talk about this film, Liam, where would you rank this film in the list of John Woo Western films? Before I watched it, I would have placed it close to the top. And although I still think it's great, it doesn't feel as action-packed as I remember. If you compare it to Face Off or what I remember about Hard Target, there's not many action set pieces compared to those that I remember.
Well, the thing is, it's one of those strange films that I think there are actually quite a few action set pieces, but the big problem with this film is that very few of them land or make an impact. And I think part of the issue, as you mentioned in the intro, is that it's set in the Utah desert and that it never really changes. They do talk in the film about going towards the city, but they never actually get to the city. They get close with the train and stuff. But every action set piece is set against fundamentally the same backdrop. So it just all gets a little bit bland and forgettable. And I'm watching these sequences and I'm like, well, they are kind of quite impressive in and of themselves. But I'm like, why aren't any of these really getting my attention? And I guess to answer your question, I mean, does it really matter? Because when you talk about John Woo and Western films, there's Face Off, there's a massive drop off, and then there's Hard Target, there's Mission Impossible 2. And to be honest, you could throw a blanket over all of them. And when I was watching this film, for the most part, it feels like a really generic 90s action movie, which is somewhat saved by three things. A little bit of John Woo flair, which sadly you don't get quite enough of. Maybe he doesn't have quite the confidence that he obviously did.
I think it was more studio interference with this one. I think
you are right, yeah. But the other two are the fantastic score by Hans Zimmer.
Yeah.
But more so than anything, and the one thing I really forgot about this movie before rewatching it was just how fucking bananas and how massive John Travolta's performance is in this film.
Yeah.
And it's like, I get the impression that the only two people, when it came to John Woo, coming from Hong Kong cinema and moving to the West, the only two people who actually went out and watched Hard Boiled and watched A Better Tomorrow and kind of took in, say, Chow Yun-fat's performance and said, what do our performances need to be to meet the levels of John Woo, to meet those levels of kind of exuberance and over-the-top action that he wants to bring to the West? Only two people who did it were Cage and Travolta. Because, you know, I wrongly assumed last week that Travolta was trying to meet Cage's performance in Face Off. It's like, no, he was already doing it in this movie. Yeah, and if anything, because of the people he's playing against, his performance in this film I actually think feels even bigger.
Well, I feel we're going to disagree on one of the first things you said, which is Face Off and then everything else. Because although I haven't seen it for a while, I'm putting Hard Target first. Now, this may change.
Whoa, ahead of Face Off?
Yes. This may change when I watch it again.
Oh, that will 100% change.
I'll throw
you a bone here. It's Face Off.
Throw me a bone.
No, because you need to be throwing a bone on this one. There's Face Off. There's a pretty big gap. I will give you Hard Target is probably second, although I'll need to rewatch it. I mean, yeah. And then you've got another gap. And I would say I would still put this ahead of Mission Impossible 2 because I think that film.
Mission Impossible 2 is right at the bottom.
It's got some okay bits, but it's a bad film.
Yeah.
But yeah, this film, it's not fantastic. But like you said, the thing it does have is Travolta. God bless him.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'll talk about this film, but we need to get to the absolute ridiculousness of you saying Hard Target is not as good as Face Off. It's better.
I think, again, it's one of those hills that you are very much alone on, I suspect.
I don't know. I mean,
I don't think many people put Hard Target ahead of Face Off.
history is against you on these hills. Except
you know,
for, I will give you Empire Strikes Back. I seem to be the only one dying on that hill.
I don't think I've ever met anyone who's like, do you know what I prefer to Face Off? Fucking Hard Target. Like, usually, let's be clear, like, Face Off is kind of considered one of the best action movies in the 90s. We did the Nicolas Cage season a while ago, and when people talk about, and it's not just because Nicolas Cage is in it, that 3-year run of Face Off, Con Air, and The Rock, not only was it an unbelievable run, I think most people those are 3 of the best action movies of the 90s. Nobody talks about Hard Target as one of the best action movies of the 90s because alert, it's not. It's fine. It's fine in the same way.
This is coming from two people who had a text conversation yesterday about the fact I was super excited that I found Deep Rising on Disney Plus.
Yeah, and if anything backs up my stance, it's your love of Deep Rising, another absolutely a best bang average sci-fi film. But to bring it back,
when you rewatch it for this podcast, which you will do,
yes, I will. I have no doubts. The more I shit on the film, the more I'm like, oh, he's going to double down on this, and I'm going to end up watching it for sure.
Right. Anyway, I mean, for a start, let's get to, because you're right. John Travolta is like peak villain in this film, and he took this and he took it to Face Off. I totally agree with that. But how nobody believed he was going to turn evil. They gave this guy 2 nuclear... Actually, no, they didn't give it. Apparently, he made the weapons. Because he turned around to Christian Slater and said, I used uncoded circuit boards, so you've just armed a nuclear weapon. So he used uncoded circuit boards, so he made it. He made the nuclear...
I mean, whatever his involvement, I mean, it's insane that he was even allowed near it for that exact point. He is the most evil-looking man of all time. I mean, John Woo helps. There's a lot of crash zooms, and just in case you don't get it, they crash zoom right into his evil eyes as he looks on menacingly. I was like, yeah, I get it. I was like, when they try and palm it off as a reveal, I mean, thank God the reveal is at least mercifully early in the film. Yeah. But I'm like, is this supposed to be a reveal that John Travolta's evil? Because you know it from the very start of that god-awful boxing fight at the start of the film, which is supposedly they trained for months to do that, and it's terrible. And the only thing worse than that is the handbag fight that they have in the plane. I mean, you can't see me doing it on the podcast, but they're literally just tapping hands. It's a horrible action.
Their fight at the end got better. Their fight,
100%.
But I mean, what I did like about that box, I love the bird's eye view as it's coming down to the ring, and then it intercuts. So I think John Woo kind of did that because he's like, we can't concentrate fully on these 2 boxing. We can't do that.
It's wise, yeah.
Let's just do it above first, and then we'll do a bit of box, because my God, those 2 couldn't. And I'm no boxer, but that was a bit rough.
It was a tough watch, because I actually think the sequence is shot relatively well, and as you say, there's that interesting shot from above where it comes into the action. But their boxing skills just don't match up. But, it doesn't help that, let's be clear, Travolta is in a completely different weight class. But it's Travolta in particular who is just so unconvincing throwing a punch, which I was quite surprised by. Yeah. But, don't get me wrong, though. He makes up for it soon after by... I forgot just how fucking cool he looks in this film. When he's got, the fighter jet suit on, he's got the aviator glasses, he's smoking a cigarette, and they put a Coke in his other hand. Oh, and of course, and we'll get to assume his theme is playing, which plays almost constantly throughout this film. I
fucking love that thing. That's my text alert song when my phone's on silent.
It's an amazing... if you're going to play the same song over and over again in the movie, make sure it's this one. It's like they've heard it and gone, guys, this is a fucking belter. We should just keep... And they obviously know that the star of this film is Travolta. So it's like every time he's on screen, they remind you with his theme tune. But there's a bit when he's walking over the top and he's got the AV, he's got the suit, his cigarette, a can of Coke. And I was just like, man, that is a fucking dude. He just looks so bad. And he's got all the charisma in the world. He loses a lot of his cool points the moment he changes into his civilian clothing, because it's so 90s.
That turtleneck.
It's not even quite a turtle. It's like a half turtleneck.
But the way he
until
smokes
then, he's... Oh, dude, the way he...
I was going to say, right, the way he smokes a fag, but we have American listeners, and I'm not too sure they understand if I say smoke a fag.
Smoke a cigarette for sure.
Smoke a cigarette. So the way he smokes a cigarette, like when he's taking a drag, he opens his fingers, and it's the weirdest thing in the world.
It is, but it's all part of that massive John Travolta performance. Again, it's not just everything about that performance is big, and one of the big issues with this movie is that Christian Slater just doesn't come to meet it. And I think one of the big problems is that Slater just isn't, and they tried to push him as this in like the early to mid 90s as a traditional leading man.
Yeah.
And he's not. Like he's one of these, like he's a character actor cursed with good looks, basically.
I mean, nothing against Slater. He was kind of dragged into this mind because they wanted Travolta to play Riley Hale.
Yeah.
When Travolta read, which again, I'm saying strong name, Riley. Strong
name. I understand.
But when he read the script, he felt he could do more with Vic Deacon. So then they had to scramble to bring in a hero. And I think Christian Slater did well. I'm a big fan of Hard Target as well. Not Hard Target. I've already said that. Hard Rain, Heavy Rain, Hard Rain.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Hard Rain, where Christian Slater goes up against Morgan Freeman in a flooded town.
I like Christian Slater. I just think he's wasted on movies like this where he's playing just the straight good guy, because I just don't think it plays to his strengths. Like all of his, even when he was younger and he does stuff like Gleaming the Cube and Heathers and stuff, he's always got that kind of glint in his eye because he's playing someone just off center. Like, he's playing kind of like an alternative character.
Yeah, at any point he could turn psychotic. That's the kind of thing.
In True Romance, he's just a bit weird. And that's his shtick. And obviously when he goes off the rails, he really does. And you're like, wait, is he a little bit mental? And that's when he's at his best. And I think when he was kind of pigeonholed for a few years here, and obviously it didn't play out because, he kind of disappeared then for a few years because it just didn't work with him as a leading man. And this film in particular, he's fine. But when he's going out, like he gets acted off the fucking screen by Travolta.
That's the problem. That's the problem you've got, isn't it? When you've got, it was the same with Face Off. We preferred Travolta as the villain. Because when you go up against these an actor who is just swinging for the fences, it kind of puts you on the back burner, and it kind of overshadows.
Come to meet it.
Yeah, it kind of overshadowed Christian Slater, and he was unable to get up there. But I liked his hero turn. I thought he was good. You mentioned Heathers then. They stole the Heathers line, didn't they?
Oh yeah.
Fuck them if they can't take a joke. Because that Christian Slater says that, doesn't he? Before he sets the house to explode, the school to explode.
Yeah. Travolta does it. Yeah. And he, again, all the best lines. I'm not sure if it's just he happens to have the best lines or he delivers them in the best way, but all the best lines are with Travolta for sure. It's like, what is he said something about? I know that's his speed, 100% pussy. I was like, what a line!
Yeah. And it's when he's talking about was it? I've never killed somebody with my hands before. I mean, I've dropped bombs over Baghdad. I don't see what all the fuss is about. Like he just
even with the nuclear explosion, it ends like the helicopter goes down. It's like, I say, God damn, what a rush!
Yeah, which was
huge.
Stolen from Pulp Fiction when Uma Thurman gets. I think it's
when she does the coke in the toilet.
Yeah,
she's God damn, what a goddamn. This film cribs from other films, only occasionally successfully. But I say the big issue with.
So before we move on, we're talking about lines. Sorry, I just want to mention one more line. The line I did at the beginning. The reason why I love that line. What a terrible thing to say, because it's echoey. Then all of a sudden, the fantastic theme comes on, the slow motion comes on, and then Travolta just walks through. And at that moment, John Travolta's doing some sort of hero walk.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not...
Because he thinks he's the hero. Like he's so fucking smug in this movie. He should be a completely unlikable character. But because it's John Travolta, and we're talking 96 John Travolta, he's got all the confidence in the world, he's coming off Pulp Fiction, a bunch of hits, and he just rolls into this film. And I'm not sure if Travolta's ever been that. As I said, because he's not playing against Cage in Face Off, where they're both swinging for the fences, this performance to me feels bigger because no one else is coming close to meeting him.
No.
And another problem with Christian Slater is, like, at the one end of the spectrum, he's coming up against Travolta, who's absolutely going for it, and he obviously makes the decision, or he's told, "I don't try to meet that performance, just go more traditional '90s action hero." But he spends the rest of his time on screen next to Samantha Mathis, who, and I don't like to be mean, but is so fucking bad in this film that it's almost beyond belief. Like, she was like a legit leading. I mean, she was Princess Daisy, obviously, in the Super Mario Brothers. She was like, did voice work in Fern Gully. She was in The Punisher, of all things. But she was like super famous, partly for dating River Phoenix when he died and stuff.
Yeah.
But I see her in this film, and I'm just like, I don't get it. I mean, she was obviously market corrected a few years later by, like, Sandra Bullock. Like, you know, she ate up all those roles. But it's not just, oh, well, Sandra Bullock showed up on the scene. It's like, Jesus Christ, we needed Sandra Bullock because she's just not very good.
She asked Sandra Bullock for advice on what to do with the action roles. Well, and then Sandra Bullock, I think Sandra Bullock told her to hum, I want to say the Superman theme. It might be another theme. I think I got it in facts, but told her to hum a theme before doing the roles. But I mean, I don't know whether it was uncomfortable because she's going up against her ex-boyfriend, and maybe it was a bad split. I'm not too sure, because obviously they were dating, because they would pump up the volume together. Although, it's the voice she's putting on or anything, but, oh, mate, she drags this movie down, doesn't she?
She really does. And one of the other strange things, and I was trying to, because I couldn't remember if it got explained or not, like, right from the start of the film, she shows up, she's got a Magnum, she can go toe-to-toe with Christian Slater, who's supposed to be, I don't know, special forces or whatever. You know, they have, like, the knife fight, she's throwing down, like, obviously later on, she's heavily involved in the action. And at some point, I'm like, surely they're going to explain why she can do all this, because the answer can't be because she's a park ranger. But they never explain.
The answer is because she's a park ranger.
It's fucking bananas that she is so involved. And like I said, right from the off, that she has that full-on face-off style moment with Christian Slater. I'm like, wait, why is she such a badass? Yeah. Why is she carrying that absolute fucking hand cannon? It's like, it's fine. They'll explain it. No, they bloody won't.
And I'm sorry, right? Landmine mud is not a fucking thing. Stepping on, was it cryptographic soil or whatever the fuck she said?
She's just making things up. And I do wonder, like, you look at some of the other people who are up for the role, like Helen Hunt was up for the role, but she ended up doing Twister. Jennifer Aniston was actually up for the role, and I think she would have been the obvious kind of alternative, because Helen Hunt's a really good actress. Yeah. I'm not sure I buy it in this role. Like, I buy her as a park ranger, but I buy her as an actual fucking park ranger, not superstar park ranger. And the other famous one was Halle Berry, who they said, we can't cast her because park rangers aren't black.
And what the fuck is that about? Park rangers aren't black.
It's one of those things. It's horrible. Obviously, it's horrible. But because it was the 90s, and hopefully people can look back with a sense of humor about it, because it's so ludicrous that somebody at the studio has gone, oh, no, it can't be Halle Berry. Why not? She's amazing. Yeah, but she's black. Okay, why is that an issue? Well, park rangers aren't black. And they go, oh, yeah, of course, park rangers are never black.
In the same vein, they're saying park rangers aren't black, but they've got black actors as army guys. They got Delroy Lindo, who's leading the charge.
Yeah, that's fine. They're just not park rangers. I don't even think the brilliance of it, like you said, there are black actors in other roles. I'm not convinced it's a racist move. I just genuinely think some idiot has gone, I just don't think park rangers are black. I just don't think that, I don't think the audience will buy that. Because as you say, there are black actors in prominent roles, but for some reason, you just can't be a park ranger. It's a really odd, uniquely compartmentalized racism. It's like, black guys can do whatever they want. Of course they can be whatever, but they can't be park rangers. They can't be park rangers.
Or is it black females can't be park rangers? Do you know
what? It could be that compartmentalized. It could be.
We joke about it, right? On this podcast about dying on a hill. Usually we're all, and that guy, that producer, whoever it was, that guy in the studio said something he shouldn't have. Instead of thinking it, he said it, and then he doubled down. Did you just say we're not having Halle Berry because park rangers can't be black? Yeah. No, definitely park rangers. Have you ever seen a park ranger? Have you been to a national park? Have you seen a black park ranger? What? Are you sure?
I wonder if like these things, like because it happened to me in university, like like if you get someone's name wrong and they don't correct you within like a couple of seconds, it's immediately too late and it's weird. So then for like a whole year, I called this guy and I thought it was weird. He was clearly from Africa, but I thought he said his name was Dave. So I just called him Dave for a whole year. And because I knew him first, before anyone else in like halls of residence got to know him, everyone else said, because he was quite shy, and they said, oh, what's his name? So I told everyone his name was Dave. Everyone started calling him Dave. And he didn't say shit until the last day of the third year university. He's like, by the way, my name's not Dave. I was like, why the fuck didn't you tell me? He's like, I don't know. And I wonder if it's a similar story with this, where he said something so ludicrous about park rangers not being black, that because nobody responded immediately, like they've come out of the meeting almost confused. They're like, wait, can we kind of roll this back now? It's like, it's too late. The wheels are in motion. So it can't be Hal Berry anymore. But like I said,
that's why I would have
been happy with anyone.
That's why my friend's family, for years, for nearly 20 odd years, think my name is Wesley. Because my nickname is Wes. Mm-hmm. One of them called me Wesley because they thought it was just...
It makes sense.
It's latched on. And my friend hasn't got the heart to tell him, no, his real name's Rob. So...
It's too late.
I'm Wesley to that side of the family.
Yeah. You're Wesley to that side of the family, and park rangers can't be black, and this is how these things happen. Yeah. Ludicrous. But like I said, I would have preferred pretty much anyone in that role. I just don't think she's very good. But like I said, I don't think anyone really is particularly brilliant in this film, because... like I said, it's a problem across most John Woo Western film movies, is that they don't bring the energy required to match
the problem is as well, it's a throwaway script. It's a throwaway story, to be honest.
It's a generic 90s action movie.
It's such a B-movie act. And you got like B-movie actors as well supporting them. But then when you get the likes of John Travolta, who is on a resurgence as of late in the late 90s, we've already said it. He is elevating what should be just a straight to DVD, like Under Siege 2 kind of film. It's just
It's got just enough about it to, like I said at the top. It's got Travolta, it's got the score, and it's got John Woo, and that all just about raises what should otherwise be throwaway 90s.
Yeah, and it's a rewatchable film, and it's really good. Mm-hmm. Did you think as well? Travolta's been planning this for years, right? Apparently, to the point where he's able to make the bombs. Mm-hmm. Okay, could he have hired better henchmen? Because none of those henchmen, except for Howie Long, who came from the army as well, none of them look like army guys or any guys with training or anything like that. They just
no. And the biggest issue is why. I mean, let's be clear. Bob Gunton is. I thought it might be my namesake. I thought his name was Pritchard, but it's Pritchett.
Pritchett.
It's just Pritchett. Yeah,
he's fucking annoying, dude.
He's super. Like, we already know he can play a bad guy. He's a fantastic. Is it the Green Mile he's in? I think is like the head honcho there or something. I don't know. Anyway, he's capable of playing a decent bad guy. The problem is in this. You're just like, dude, you're not cut out for a life of crime, quite clearly, because all he does is panic from the word go. Yeah. From the moment
I'll
he's
correct
involved.
You. Shawshank. So it is
Shawshank,
but he's the
sorry, it is. As I was saying, Green Mile, I'm pretty sure Shawshank. Yeah. He just looks so ill-suited to a life of crime. I'm just like, why are you involved? Why are you even there? Just let John Travolta get on with it.
He's the money man, isn't he? He's been convinced. Yeah, and then he's come for, like, all the guys have sent him for insurance to go, right, you go and make sure this is on track. And he's panicking and he's yelling. He's thinking that Deakins is just inept at everything he does. Well, he's not that inept because he was able to kill him with a torch. Did you know as well?
That was an awesome kill scene. Yeah. Again, that was the thing. He was so pony in this film that you just like, at least you just know it's like, well, he's going to die an undignified death for sure. And I'm not sure there's much more dignified than being killed by a torch. But the way he's killed is brutal.
Yes,
it's brilliant because he's moaning all the way through, so he just like crushes his larynx. So it's like, God damn, that is nasty.
And then Travolta's going, shush, shush, like. But did you know, Bob Gunton? The last thing he did. Mm-hmm. He hasn't died or anything. He's got upcoming roles. But the last thing he did, he was actually the motion capture for Egon in Ghostbusters Afterlife. Yeah.
Oh, cool. The effects in that actually worked really well. I thought
he was credited as the ghost farmer.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, one of the things we were talking about before this podcast was the kind of mess they had made with Harrison Ford being de-aged at the start of Dial of Destiny, and like the weird combination of like old Harrison Ford's voice. You're not quite sure who's doing the body double. Like there's a scene when he's running on top of the train, and like it just looks weird. But then I think of like a successful example of that, and obviously it's not quite as intense in terms of the action involved and how much the camera really zooms on the face. But I actually thought what they did with Egon at the end of Afterlife was pretty impressive.
It looked really good. I watched that again recently, and it looks really good. It looks like Egon. It's great.
That's like I actually my only issue with the end scene is like I think the introduction of the original Ghostbusters is super clumsy at the end of that. You would think it's such a shame, because you would think the big issue, you're like, oh man, if you drop the ball on the Egon thing, it's going to be horrible. But they get the hard thing right. But then the easier thing of reintroducing the original Ghostbusters is absolutely fucking... Yeah. Oh, they dropped the ball with that. It's horrible. I quite like a lot of that film, but that sequence made me cringe pretty bad, sadly. Anyway, this isn't...
bringing it back to Broken Arrow, right? I mean, realistically, Deacons and Hale flying these nuclear weapons. They're just delivery men at this point, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Do you give delivery men codes to the nuclear weapons?
I guess they need to be involved. Like, if they're the pilots, they're the ones who actually have to shoot them out. I'm not sure if it was like different in terms of technology.
Yeah, but no, codes to arm them.
Yeah, it seems
they know that you can put the wrong code in several times to disable it, blah, blah, blah. But apparently they know the codes to arm them.
Well, if you're the ones who are actually dropping the bombs, I guess maybe, and I'm not sure if there's anything to back this up, is like as a contingency, like if you suddenly have to shoot them and they can't arm them electronically from, the base, then they need to be able to arm them to carry out their mission, maybe.
How are they dropping these bombs from the stealth ship if they need to arm them first with a code?
I don't know. But then
do they get out, go into the cargo bay and arm them? Or
I guess one could go, maybe.
Do we not? Is this why then he's saying he uses whatever circuit boards, uncoded circuit boards?
Yeah.
Is there a scene that was cut where they take the nuclear and place them into that cage that's got the buttons, but then that doesn't make sense either, because Hale then knows about these buttons that can uncode it. So it's really weird that they have the codes, but the codes need it to be armed, but they're missiles or they're bombs that can be dropped. So how do they arm them?
I guess traditionally they can just be electronically, and then the buttons are just like a backup for the people on board. I'm thinking something along those lines. I think a lot of the decisions are just made to suit the narrative, and that's about it. And just to add a bit of tension, which you need with, like you said, like the big set piece in the movie is realistically, because there are a couple, but you have the opening sequence with the stealth bombers. It actually holds up pretty well, as I said, with the exception of the handbag fight, which I don't think really works. But then, arguably, the big one is the underground fight. Again, the problem is everything just looks so brown and deserty. But that sequence, I'm like, a lot goes on. You have a nuclear explosion. I'm like, this is all really impressive. But the only thing that ever really stuck in my mind was the dude trying to pull a pin out of a grenade. It's so fucking bananas. Like the face he pulls. I'm like, what is this guy going
also, for? Is that how that dude eats pussy? Because the way he's trying to...
I don't know, man. He's
trying to tongue that pin. Like, that's how he's playing with a clit, isn't it? It's got to be.
I don't know. It's a bizarre approach to grenade pin pulling, to say the least. But it speaks to like the quality of the movie that I remember that rather than everything that went on in the action sequence. And even like, if you want to know, just because we did Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls last week, one of the like high points of the film, I thought, was just how good the nuclear explosion is. It's like, everyone remembers the fridge, but they forget just how impressive the actual nuclear explosion that precedes it is. And if you want to know how good that really is, go back and watch the nuclear explosion in Broken Arrow by comparison, because what happens
the explosions underground, and the way it concaves is great. But
that's not bad. But what's going on back at the base with that fucking 1960s Star Trek shit, when they just like we're just going to shake the camera and they're just kind of like leaning over? It looks so rudimentary and black. Like I agree with you. The bit where the land kind of like rises up and then drops back in, that actually looks pretty cool. And then the helicopter goes down because of the like the EMP kind of style thing. I was like, that's all pretty cool. But it's cut either side of everybody, like the shaky cam bullshit that's in between. It's just like, oh man, this just looks rough as hell. It kind of ruins an otherwise like really good sequence.
I want to bring up three things really quickly. The first thing, the general, right? I don't want to test the general's hypothesis of these bombs could sit in burning jet fuel for however long and not explode. I never want to test that hypothesis, just in case he's wrong, because that seems ridiculous. The second one, you just said about the plane crashing. I love how whenever, like, everybody's watched a film nowadays, everybody's watched an action film. You don't have to explain anymore what EMP means. Every time somebody says EMP, they have to finish off with electromagnetic pulse. Like, we get it. We know what it is. And I appreciate this in the 90s. So, yeah. But yeah, that's what I mean. It takes you back to like CSI, doesn't it? When it's you've got one member of the CSI explaining to another member of the CSI who's done the exact same training what you've done, exactly 100%. What the electrospectrograph blood analyzer does. Like
even the best movies have that though. I mean, I was rewatching Interstellar, which I know people have mixed reviews on, but it's a Christopher Nolan film. It's incredibly well made. They go to great lengths to make the science real, but to make the science work, they need to explain the science. But the only people in the room are scientists. So they're explaining fucking numpty work to scientists because really what they're doing, they might as well just turn around and talk directly into the camera and go, this is for you guys. You know, like the movie that did the best, I think, was The Big Short, wasn't it? Where they suddenly cut to Margot Robbie in a bath explaining shorts. Yeah. Shorts is in the financial shorts, not shorts that you wear on your backside. And it was just like they were so self-aware of it. It's just like they just broke the fourth wall and go, oh, here's Margot Robbie explaining the financial situation in a bath. Like, yeah, that's what we could have done with. They should do that for every, like...
Just have Margot Robbie in a bath. Yeah.
Have a Margot Robbie in a bath. That'd be so much better.
And the third thing I wanted to mention.
Yeah, go for it, bud.
Bring it up because we didn't. I mentioned in my intro, but we haven't really discussed it. Do you think they were deep enough for it not to cause any? Like I know you can test them underground. That's the whole big thing about North Korea at the moment, isn't it? Apparently they're testing theirs underground. But how deep underground have you got to go to avoid any? Because I know that was a mine, but they didn't travel that far to go underground.
They didn't travel that far. I guess, like, you know, what you have, just a sequence where they go further and further down in the lift. Is that about it? I mean, again, I agree. It probably isn't enough. Does it really matter to the scene? No. My bigger issue is much more with the shaky cam stuff. But there are a lot of questions, like you mentioned there about, like, you know, the nuclear bombs. You know, how easy is it to set off a nuclear bomb? Because John Travolta seems very concerned throughout. It's like, would you mind not shooting at the thermonuclear weapons, all that shit? Like, he says that like 3 fucking times. I'm like, will a bullet really set off a nuke? I was like, I don't think that's how they work, dude.
So a bullet will set it off.
Supposedly created it.
A bullet will set it off, but the burning jet fuel won't. But the other thing, maybe he wasn't worried about that. Maybe he was worried about the fact that, and I've mentioned this about 6 times already, they didn't have any more uncoded circuit boards. So if they accidentally cracked
his tone suggested he was worried that they were going to set it off for sure. But it's strange. But then, is it as strange as... And I couldn't tell if he was joking. So John Travolta's big aim out of all this, you know, get the nuclear down. And of course, like, part of it is he is mental. And you're like, does he just want to set off the nukes in Utah? And Utah, of course. It's like his plan is, so his Swedish broker is going to buy him a 5% stake in Volvo and then subsequently live off the dividends, living happily in the knowledge that he's helping to build the safest car on the planet. Now, he says that with a relatively straight face. Is that his actual plan, or is it just an overly elaborate joke? I couldn't fucking tell.
I mean, I think it was a bit of a joke, wasn't it? It's basically just saying he wants to sit around doing fuck all for forever now. So, but
it probably is the case. But it was just the way he delivered it. I was like, is that actually like his absolutely bonkers plan? Because as the movie goes on, he does just get crazier and crazier and crazier. And I for all my issues with this movie, which are plenty, I absolutely love his fucking performance. And the fact that I can't tell if that's his actual plan. It's like, my big aim is to buy a 5% stake in Volvo. I'm like, I fucking hope that's true, man. That would be awesome.
His performance in this is great, and it does elevate. You said as well, right? You talked about Utah a lot. But they're trying to get to Washington, aren't they? Because they want to release it in Washington, isn't that?
Maybe all I ever hear in this film is Utah. That might well be the case. I think in terms of narrative, plot, plan, I was like, I just stopped caring because I'm like, listen, they're never getting out of this goddamn desert. They're just not getting out of the desert. Obviously, like the budget doesn't allow for it. They're spending all on explosions, and that is one of the movie's
How the fuck do they get
issues.
on a train as well? Where's the train station?
Where did the train come from?
All of a sudden, they're not just on a train; they're on their private train.
Yeah, what the fuck? Like all the way through, there's like 3 of them in a Jeep, and then all of a sudden they have a private train. Like, what the hell's going on there?
Yeah.
And I get it, again, for narrative purposes, like, oh, it'd be cool to have an action set piece on a train. And it is. But realistically, what it needed was an action set piece in different surroundings.
Yeah.
Like, they needed to get closer, like whether it be Washington or Utah or whatever, they needed an action sequence in the city just to break things up, because the movie becomes visually bland, sadly. And it's a shame, because a John Woo movie shouldn't be visually bland, and the action never really is. You know, there are hints, like you mentioned earlier, of people diving through the air unnecessarily, you know, a bit of slow motion and stuff. But the action surrounding them, and certainly the actual surroundings, are always a little bit too bland, sadly. So, like I said, one of the biggest issues of this film is that it's an action film where none of the action set pieces are particularly memorable, which is a crime. But
did you recognize Max, the Navy SEAL who could kill you with his thumb?
Well, he was like, do you know what I could do with my thumb? I'm like, do Navy SEALs have like thumb skills? Is that a thing? Like, why would you try and kill somebody with your thumb? It's very strange.
Did you recognize him?
No, I didn't recognize him. No, I'm sorry.
So he's a big TV guy, but so he's Sean Tube, and he's a Yinsen from Iron Man.
Oh, yeah. I got you. Yeah. No, I didn't. There's like a couple of faces. Like, is it Frank Wiley or Whaley? I'm not sure.
Frank Whaley,
who plays Giles. And I was like, he was one of those guys. I'm like, man, I know him from so many things. And he was in Career Opportunities with Jennifer Connelly. Obviously, nobody remembers in that because everybody just remembers Jennifer Connelly's boobs in that movie. He was in Field of Dreams, which I forgot. But the big one, and I think the thing I was trying to attach him to, was he's the what guy from Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
With John, again, a link to John Travolta. And he's fantastic. Like, one of the most memorable sequences, but arguably in movie history. And he's in it.
I knew you wouldn't bring up the one that I remember him from.
What's that? I thought you were like, of course you're bringing up Jennifer Connelly's boobs in Career Opportunities.
No, Dead Dog Soup.
Oh, what the fuck is Dead Dog Soup? I don't
Cold
know
Dog
what
Soup.
is.
Sorry, it's called Cold Dog Soup, not Dead Dog Soup.
I don't think it matters. Oh, no, of course, Cold Dog Soup.
Frank Whaley plays a guy who's hooked up with a girl and her dog accidentally dies. So she asks him before they have sex to go out and dispose of the dog correctly. He teams up with a taxi driver named Randy Quaid, who then, if I remember rightly, are trying to sell this dog to local restaurants.
See, you do this every so often where you say a ridiculous movie, I've never heard of it, I'm like, God, that sounds like ass. And then you start describing it and telling me the names involved. And suddenly I'm like, my ears keep pricking up. I'm like, wait a minute, that sounds all right. So maybe you are right on this one. Don't get me wrong, I don't think it's going to be better than this performance in, Pulp Fiction.
No.
But all of a sudden, maybe I'll need to look into it.
I loved it.
Let's be clear. Sorry, Karen.
Oh, I loved it because you could have said all these films, and you did say all these films, and all I could think in my mind, well, 2, Cold Dog Soup, and did you ever watch Little Monsters?
Yes, yeah. Not for a long, long time.
No.
I'm wondering. I've seen it, but I can't remember shit about it.
I'm wondering at what age I can show my son Little Monsters. Because I know it's a kid's film, but it's about monsters under your bed.
Yeah, it's one of those dangerous games. I guess you judge it by your kid. Like, is he going to be freaked out by something like that? Yeah, is there like a build-up to it? But then you could say that about a lot of films from the 80s. Like, you're going to like, oh, what age can you watch People Under the Stairs? Because a lot of these films like PG, like fucking Poltergeist was PG. It's like, you're going to show Riley Poltergeist? Fuck that. Even, we mentioned it like a bunch of times, but like Temple of Doom, especially the cut you see on Disney Plus now where they have like the extra gore bit and stuff. Yeah. You watch it like, man, I wouldn't show that to like a fucking 5-year-old kid. No, just no way.
Yeah.
No, you got to give him a few years. But it's strange that, like, we mentioned the issues with the action set pieces, and I actually think the stuff on the train is perfectly decent.
For a third part, for the final action sequence, the whole train thing, I think is really good. I think it's really good.
I agree with you. I like the action set. I think their fight in the final act of the film is far superior to the boxing match at the start of the film. Maybe just because it's a bit more movie style, kung fu-y, so we're maybe a bit more forgiving. But it's still like, what do I remember from the end of that film? I remember the oddly sexual sequence of the code being input by Samantha and John Travolta. I'm like, why is that scene so sexy? At that point, have they just gone like, John Travolta's lost his fucking mind? And in fairness, Christian Slater's character does say that to him. It's like, oh, you've lost your mind. And at that point, he's all wide-eyed, smiles. He is at, like, if for the whole film, he's going like at 90%. He takes it to 100 in like the final act of this film. But that sequence where she's entering the code and his gun is basically serving as an impromptu penis, and he's like right up in her ear, and he might as well have just licked her face. It's so oddly and needlessly erotic. But because the characters have nothing in the build-up to that sequence, there's no relationship between those two characters. No. And then for some reason, he basically gun fucks her as she's entering a passcode at the end of the film. I'm like, why exactly is this happening? Like, if there was some kind of relationship built up earlier or sexual tension or something, but because they basically just fucking met and he does that to her, I'm like, is it just to show how crazy he is? Because don't get me wrong, by this point, we know he's clearly out of his fucking mind. We don't need the weird passcode sex sequence. Yeah. It's such an odd part of the film.
Not just that, but then you've got the voyeurism of Howie Long just stood there watching.
Oh, dude, the whole sequence is bonkers.
But the reason why he's just watching, looking like he's out of place, is because he is out of place. He was actually meant to die at the beginning of the film, but they loved this performance so much, they kept him through for the rest of the film, right up until the end when he gets kicked off the train car. So
it's amazing.
So they were like, just stand there and look weird while, as you say, John Travolta gun fucks Samantha Mathis.
And it's one of the things, like, again, shows the difference in quality in terms of writing, performances, everything. You think about, like, The Rock as a comparison.
Yeah.
Like, with The Rock, you end up getting this kind of, this conflict internally between the bad guys.
The film, not the actor, yeah?
Yeah, sorry, The Rock, the movie, the 1997, 96 film, The Rock?
Anyway. 96, same year as this, yeah.
Yeah, 96. And, what ends up happening is you have this, as I say, conflict between the bad guys where you have some of them who just want to do something mental, like they're willing to go that extra mile, and then someone else is like, listen, I'm not going that far. And in this, you've got all these soldiers who are clearly all there to get paid. And by the end of the film, it's so obviously apparent that John Travolta doesn't give two fucks about the money, and he just wants to blow shit up, and he's out of his mind. And there's no conflict. The only conflict is maybe the stuff with him and Bob Gunton, Pritchett.
Yeah.
But that's almost played for laughs at time because they go too heavy too early where he's just out of his element. So there's nothing there, and everyone's just watching John Travolta go insane, and nobody gives a shit. And it's just one of those like little parts of the film where you're just like, again, speaking to that, like, you take away Travolta, you take away Wu, and what you fundamentally have left, and of course that fantastic score, and what you have left is a really, really generic, relatively poorly written action movie. And ultimately, I think that's what Broken Arrow is. It's got just enough there to make it memorable, and as you say, there's enough, like, when you go back and rewatch it, because of those key elements, it is oddly rewatchable, and it is still kind of fun. But the core, the basis of this film is bang average at best, sadly.
Yeah. Hey, how have we not mentioned as well, by the way, Delroy Lindo and bloody Clarence Bodica are in this film?
Yeah, it does have some proper faces in this film. Like a lot of like, what the fuck is he in? Like just a lot of guys where you just try and remember what they're from, basically.
Yeah, it was Clarence Bodica he was known for, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I know him as Red as well. From
Red, I think Red Foreman.
I think most people now know him as Red, or I know him as the dude from Rambo 3, who goes and gives him Rambo the speech in Thailand.
Joe.
I love him in that. So that's another. God damn it, we have to do Rambo 3.
Well, this is what I was just going to say, right? You bring up Rambo 3 a lot. Okay, you bring it up a lot.
I do.
I'm not too sure I've seen it.
All right. Let's be clear. Next week's podcast, we've already had the discussion beforehand. I was going to pick Superman the movie, and I still want to.
I don't know if you can pick Rambo 3 before we do Rambo 2.
Oh, no, we're not doing Rambo 2. Rambo 2 is rubbish. I don't want to do Rambo 2. I don't want to rewatch it. I rewatched Rambo 2 about a year or two ago, and I never enjoyed it growing up, and I rewatched it, and I don't like it now. And, dude, I mean, if anyone should know that we don't give a fuck about the order that we do this podcast, you only need to look at Star Wars and all these other things. We do, like, maybe we will do Rambo 2 one day, because there is a lot to pick up.
Well, we might have to, because you've just turned around and said you don't give a fuck about it, and I prefer Rambo 2.
You actually prefer, but you just said you haven't seen Rambo 3.
Rambo 2 over Rambo 1.
Oh, you are out of your mind. You are out of your fucking mind.
No.
If you
Rambo,
think Rambo 2
so,
is better. Rambo 1
up, right,
is a
randomly.
legitimately great movie.
Do you know when you had, VHSs growing up?
Yeah.
So randomly, I would just have, and I've told you this before, Temple of Doom, Rocky
Brilliant.
2,
Rocky 2, man, Jesus Christ,
and
that's rough.
Rambo 2. They were the VHSs I had.
Who bought you? What mean ass person was like, oh, let's get him a Rocky film. I know, we'll get him Rocky 2,
yeah.
and we'll get him a Rambo film. Let's get him First Blood Part 2. That is somebody who clearly doesn't. You're going to say it's your mum now. Just like, dude, I don't think she liked you very much.
So they were the VHSs.
Horrible choices.
They're not the only VHSs I had. But
I know. But if
they were the ones I would watch. Like Rocky. I watched them more as the series than the other ones, but I honestly don't think I have seen Rambo 3.
Well, we're doing Rambo 3 next week now, to put a spoiler on the end. Rambo 3, let's be clear, if you wanted to make an argument, I prefer Rambo 3 to Rambo 2 unequivocally. You can make an argument between Rambo 2 and Rambo 3 because Rambo 3 is one of the most ludicrous movies in the world. And we've talked a bunch of times, it's like, what's the most 80s movies ever? And, Commando often pops into our heads because, our idea, of course, you could go to like The Breakfast Club and stuff like that. But I would make an argument that the most definitively 80s thing possibly ever created is Rambo 3. And the fact that you haven't watched it is almost, it was the most expensive movie ever made at the time.
Maybe I have, but from trying to think about it now, especially you said that he goes up against Russians and things like that. Every time I think of Rambo 3 or some action guy going up against Russians, I have Red Scorpion in my head.
Well, I'll tell you this much: it's much better than Red Scorpion.
Thank you.
And I know you like Red Scorpion.
We have him on this podcast now and then, Dave. We went through a point of remembering Red Scorpion as being brilliant. We made all our friends sit down and watch it.
Oh, no, you didn't do that.
Half hour into the film, we paused it, turned around to our friends and went, I'm so sorry. Like,
you have
we remember this film being better than it was awful, dude.
Yeah, it was always awful. And I have oddly fond memories of watching it quite a bit when I was younger. And bizarrely, I had it up on my wall because there was a place back in Cardiff where it was like a second-hand store, but one of the bizarre things it used to have, and I don't know why, but it used to have VHS sleeves, but just the sleeves. Yeah. And I used to go in and buy them, like my favorite ones. And one of the ones I bought was Red Scorpion. I remember having it up on my wall. But yeah, that film has not aged well at all. And the bravado of you and Dave to go, I'm going to make other people watch Red Scorpion. This is when, some of these films you're going to go back and rewatch. And I think Rambo 2, like I said, Rambo Part 2 is better than Red Scorpion, but it hasn't aged well at all. Whereas I think the absurdity of Rambo 3, and Rambo 2 is still pretty silly, but Rambo 3 really does turn up to 11, makes it infinitely more watchable. So I think you might enjoy it.
Do you know what I do remember, though? I remember it fondly. The straight-to-DVD sequel, Red Scorpion 2.
Oh, my days. See, this is a really interesting conversation because, of course, some people will be like, wait a minute, isn't this supposed to be a Broken Arrow conversation? This happens when we accidentally do bang average movies.
Yeah.
And we end up talking about much more interesting movies. And this is one of them. And it speaks to the film that we're banging on about Rambo 3 and even Red Scorpion at this point, because it's an okay film, Broken Arrow. It's not fantastic. There's a reason it hasn't lived. And I know like you mentioned the whole Hard Target versus Face Off thing, but there's a reason that this movie hasn't lived on in the same way as those aforementioned Nick Cage films, Face Off, The Rock, Con Air. It just doesn't. It's just not in that league because those films are fundamentally good films, and then are elevated a next step by good direction, great performances. This has got those extra ingredients, but it doesn't have the base. It doesn't have, I mean, all like if it was a pizza, the top of it would be all fantastic. It'd have all kinds of shit on it, but the base would be soggy and wet. That's the problem.
Do you know where it is? Broken Arrow. Take what you just said, right? Broken Arrow's cauliflower pizza.
Yeah. If you wanted to go the other way around, sure thing. Yeah.
No, it is. It's cauliflower pizza. You got the toppings being fantastic. You've got the soundtrack, the score, the director, and the action by John Travolta. The acting by John Travolta. The rest of it then is blitzed up cauliflower turned into a fucking base.
Oh, I thought you meant cauliflower on top of the pizza. I was actually going to say I actually quite like cauliflower on top of the pizza.
I mean cauliflower as a fucking Pizza.
Oh yeah. It is. Yeah. The fundamentals of this film just aren't strong enough, and that's the issue. And it's always a shame when this happens, because usually you get like an okay film. It's it's relatively well made, it's competent, blah blah blah. But then it just doesn't have anything to elevate it. This has all those extra elements that could have potentially elevated, made a good film, a great film. Instead, it elevates a pretty poor film into being an okay film, basically.
I think we may have introduced a new section as well. Is this film a cauliflower pizza?
Yeah. Well, can we use a really enforced and strained analogy for this film? Yes, we can, involving cauliflower pizzas.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there is. I think we've pretty much covered the film. I mean, the fact that, as I said, at this point we were already talking about other ones. The one thing I will mention.
Yeah, I want to mention one thing as well before we move on.
One of the things that could have made the difference is that this film has very limited violence, and supposedly there's a longer, more violent cut that actually exists in this film. And as I said, I would like to see it, because this film is almost a good film, and I think if you throw in a greater commitment to, I don't, blood doesn't fix everything, but I think if there's more impact to the action sequences and a bit more blood, a bit more violence, I think it probably raises the bar for this film a little bit. And it's a shame that they've kind of toned all this down. So again, it just lends it just keeps feeding into that sense that this film is generic and boring. One of the most interesting death in this film is when John Travolta crushes a guy's larynx with a torch.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, that, it kind of takes you out of the movie for a second. Takes you out. That sounds bad. But it kind of grabs your attention. Like, man, that's fucking brutal. If there was a bit more of that, you're like, it might have caught my attention a bit more. But yeah, it's just not there. So nothing really lands.
No. I just wanted to mention the fact that Christian Slater should have been torn up by the end of this film. The fact he got dragged under a fucking train, and
that should have been the end of it.
Rip, and then he jumped out of a speeding train and landed in the Utah desert.
Yeah, that'd fuck you up.
And stood up, and then he found 20 quid. Or $20. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, it's movie logic, and nobody really gets hurt until they're killed, and it's just like, okay, but I can hardly remember a single thing Christian Slater did in this film, and maybe it's not his fault, because maybe he just hasn't got enough to work with. But I thought he was so forgettable in this film, and like I said,
I don't think I think for what he was given, he did very well. I like Christian Slater in this film. The problem is he is overshadowed by the absolutely ludicrous take of John Travolta.
But that's exactly what this film needed, and he should have taken that and gone, okay, I need to come up and meet that, because like you said, he's doing okay with what he's been given. That is true, because as I said, Samantha Mathis is doing terribly with what she's given. He's not doing anything as bad as that. But Christian Slater, I really like Christian Slater, and I think he's an interesting actor, but he's approaching this as a generic 90s action film, and does nothing.
If you have two over the top,
you're Face Off. That's brilliant.
It's not really Face Off, though, is it? Because Nick Cage doesn't play over the top unless he's playing the same character.
No, I know it's not. It's apples to oranges to a certain extent. I'll give you that. I just think, like I said, you need to come up and meet John Woo and meet his style, his directorial style, and I think his performance just. Because it's so laid back, and I just don't think there's much to it. He ends up just being blown off the screen in every sequence he's there. And even when John Travolta's not there, it's never long until it cuts back to John Travolta. He's like, well, this is just more interesting. I'm not saying he should be quite as mental as John Travolta in this film, because it'd probably be too much. I just think he needed to add a bit of a twist to it. I just think it's just a little bit whatever, his performance. Yeah, as I said, I think it's a shame, because as we've seen in his other movies, his other performances, he's got more to him.
Yeah, I think we'll have to agree to disagree, because although
that's fair enough.
I don't think he was terrible in this, and I think he did exactly what was needed of him. It's just the fact that even the poster knew what they wanted when they did the poster, because you've got Travolta just full faced, and then just over his shoulder you got Christian Slater peeking around, going, "Oh, I'm in it too. It's me as well."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Like you said, he does enough. I just don't think that's enough, because I don't think this movie is good enough to just do enough. I think you have to do that bit more to make it stand out. But
I appreciate you preferring a villain's mind when we're on screen right now and you've got the most villain mustache I've ever seen.
Well, that's what I'm going for. As I said at the start, I'm trying to bring back the unironic mustache. And
honestly, I didn't want to bring up your mustache, but as we're talking about villains, I fear for Beth's safety. Is she there? Is she okay? Can she just tell me she's fine?
Well, I'm glad I look like a vision. Like, I'll take villain over, I don't know, sex offender any day of the week. So let's just go with that. The one other thing, sorry, I know we said we were going to wrap this up, but did you think the whole $20 bet thing worked? Because they really did write.
Oh my God, didn't they force that fucking issue? Like, where do they keep, even to the point where you had this weird longing scene with Travolta, where as he gets changed into a civilian garb, and then he just unzips a pocket and pulls out a $20 bill. Like, why the fuck are you doing that? It felt forced.
Well, that's the thing. His character seems somewhat. A lot of the script kind of leans into this idea that John Travolta's character is somewhat enamored with Christian Slater's character, and I just never get why. And I can see a better movie, and that 20. Basically, I can see a Hong Kong crime thriller with Chow Yun-fat and I know some other actor, and them having this back and forth, and then like leaving 20. Obviously, it wouldn't be it'd be Hong Kong dollars. Like leaving that for each other and trying to top each other. Blah blah blah, and these constant bets as they get one over on each other. I can see the concept working there. It just doesn't work in this movie because, again, I don't buy into that relationship between John Travolta and Christian Slater. I don't buy them necessarily as friends. I don't buy them as equals. And it just means that whole sequence doesn't really work. I like the concept. I just don't think it works in this film.
It feels like, doesn't it, that this is the first mission they've done together, which is not meant to be the case. It's meant to be the case that they've been flying forever.
Yeah.
But it does feel like, they've just been teamed up together. It was really like their chemistry didn't seem to work a lot. I'll give you that.
It doesn't. And it also makes Christian Slater's character look unbelievably incompetent. Like, if you've been working with this guy for a number of years, you're like, how do you not realize that this guy's an absolute
psycho? First 5 minutes of the film, we all knew, even before the trailers came out or anything, we all knew this dude was evil.
100%. It's straight away as soon as the movie starts. You're like, he's a bad guy.
I loved it as well. They're even trying to do it in the film. Like they're trying to shoehorn that nobody else knew it was evil. They're going, what if Riley Hale stole all the weapons? And they're going, you were right. One of them stole the weapons, but it was Vic Deakins. It was him, really?
It was the fucking lunatic, with the really creepy looking eyes. It was him. I can't believe it was him. I cannot believe
no way in hell it was that dude. I mean, have you seen the way he smokes a cigarette? He is the good guy, if anything. Like, no.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane.
Right, shall we move on anyway? Right, so we're done with the film now. I know we've gone back to it about 3 or 4 times. Should we move on? What is it now? His favourite scene, isn't it?
Favorite scene. So, I mean, for me, it's probably the final showdown between Travolta and Slater. I think it's, the actual fight between them is much better. I enjoy the actual showdown. I think at that point, Travolta's completely lost his mind. You also get the weirdly, I know I criticize it, but the erotic kind of like code sequence is actually memorable, despite the fact that it's beyond, I still don't quite know what they're going for there. It's either that or the nuclear explosion. And I think even the nuclear explosion, for all its faults, I always remember that. I say, God damn, what a...
I was going to say, didn't you just shit on the nuclear explosion because it didn't match Crystal Skull?
Well, it doesn't. Like, it doesn't always work visually. The actual sequence is still kind of fun. And as I said, I think I'm remembering the sequence where the helicopter goes down. And again, it just comes back to Travolta again. But realistically, it's the sequence on the train for sure for me.
Just as long as it doesn't have the 60s Star Wars in the control room.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. Like, it might have been the nuclear sequence if it wasn't for those really shitty bits. But no, I mean, jokes aside, the final act of this film is the strongest part of the film, I think, without question. And it's my favorite scene for sure.
It's the same with me. It's the final confrontation. Mm-hmm. It's the chat. That, they didn't need the $20 throughout the film. Mm-hmm. They needed it at the beginning. And then at the end, where he turns around and goes, right, the $20 I took from you last night, he puts on the nuclear weapon, and then they have a fight. That scene, absolutely. You got the enclosed fight. The choreography seems really good for two guys that can't really fight. So I'm up there. I think it's really good. I think it is slightly. I don't want to say ruined, but the final shot of this movie is really bizarre and awkward, where you get that like Slater and Samantha Mathis sequence when they kind of like decide that they're kind of like, are they in love, and they go to kiss, and then it just kind of like does that 90s hard cut to the title and the soundtrack again. It just doesn't work. They shake hands to introduce themselves, and then he pulls her in closer, and it's like, and then it just ends, and I don't know, man. It just felt. I'm not including that in the favorite scene. I did want to make a joke that my favorite scene was going to be the epic fight scene in the plane, just because you've been bitching on it for about. Well, dude, like it just looks so like because you think the boxing sequence
sequence is bad. And it's weird because supposedly, like I said, they did train for a long time and Slate's got in really good shape for it. It doesn't work, but it's nowhere near as bad as, and I get it, they're in chairs and they're strapped in.
Yeah, I said, me and you need to sit next to each other in harness chairs and then try and fight. Punch.
So I don't get me wrong, I'm sure it's hard to choreograph a fight sequence with them both actually strapped into these chairs, but you've got to get them unclipped. You've got to turn it into an interesting fight sequence. Instead, they can't quite reach each other, so it just turns into handbags. It's fucking terrible. Never mind.
No, but it's the final scene.
Yeah, fair enough. In terms of loves, number one, unsurprisingly, Travolta swinging for the fences. Number two, the fact that it does actually feel like a warm-up to a better movie, i.e. Face Off. And three, the Hans Zimmer score. I was going to put John Woo in. Number two basically is the 3 points I said. It's John Travolta, it's the Hans Zimmer score, and it's John Woo's directorial style. And I don't think John Woo is necessarily his best here, but he does elevate relatively mediocre material.
I've said it enough times. When you can't think of things that you like in a film, you always move around. Oh, the fact that this sets up a better film that has nothing to do with this film.
Yeah. Well, I have the same issue with when I can't find things I hate about a film.
Your loves of films are absolutely.
This part of this amazing film reminds me, this actor who's fantastic in this film was in a really shit film 10 years ago, and that kind of reminds me of that. Yeah. It's a bit of a sneaky one, but no, it's unquestionably the three best films, and these are the only correct answers, by the way, are Travolta, Zimmer, and Woo. Those are the answers, dude.
You're 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon to get link it up to fucking Face Off is insane.
Well, I'll be amazed if those aren't your answers for this. By the way.
The score is absolutely up there,
and it has to be Travolta.
It's number one. Travolta doing Evil is fantastic.
So good.
Yeah, and the problem is, I want to say
John Woo, but you don't want to.
No, it's not that I don't want to agree with you. I've already said it doesn't feel like a John Woo film that we usually get.
No, it does in parts. That's the problem. And as I said, there was that caveat. When it does suddenly start feeling like a John Woo film, it becomes more interesting. The big issue with this film is that it doesn't feel like a John Woo film.
I'll caveat it then, right? The John Woo is my third. The John Woo scenes that don't seem to have any studio interruption.
Yeah. That's a good shout.
Because my God, and it's probably in facts. I probably got it from facts somewhere, but I think they did it with Hard Target as well, which is better than Face Off, by the way. The studio interruption is fucking. Why do they need to do this all the time?
Well, the big disappointment here is what is the point in getting this kind of visionary action director from Hong Kong cinema, bringing him over to the States and then putting a straitjacket on him? And that's one of the good things. I don't think they would do it nowadays. I think he'd have a bit more free, or I like to think he would anyway. It's if you're going to bring over John Woo, let him make a John Woo movie. Otherwise, what's the point? And that's, again, one of the issues with this. And one of the issues with Hard Target as well. It's it's only got 1 foot in the game. And at least with Face Off, the handbrake was released. Suddenly you've got the doves, you've got the diving round, and you're don't get me wrong, not all of even Face Off works, but it does feel like a John Woo movie at least. And for its faults, Mission Impossible 2 does kind of feel like a John Woo movie. It's just not a great one. That's the problem.
Yeah, that is so John Woo. There's doves and all sorts in that fucking film.
Well, that's one of the great things about, it was the interesting approach to the early Mission Impossible films, is that they were going to have a different directorial style for each Mission Impossible film. So that's the reason 1 feels so different to 2 feels so different to 3. But then the formula they kind of chanced upon with 3, they were should we just kind of keep going with this? And then they had Christopher McQuarrie, and they're just this is just a summer blockbuster machine, and it's just become a thing. It's Quarry and it's Tom Cruise, and they're some of the best action movies of the last 20 years.
Wasn't one of the
dude? I know you don't like Tom Cruise, but he's here to save the fucking
no,
box office
I'm not
again.
I don't like the Mission Impossible films. I think they
and I'm not shitting on your opinion. That's absolutely fine. But I just don't get it. You're an action movie fan. You have asked us to rewatch this.
Yeah.
And you don't like modern... they are some of the best... The last 3 Mission Impossible films have got some of the best action sequences of all time.
They're up their own ass. They're up their own ass.
Dude, this...
It's so
they're
stupid.
Absolutely
what
not.
Can we make Tom Cruise do with his action?
Let's
make Tom Cruise breathe for 9 minutes in a fucking tank because people will love it and fucking come all over the screen. And it's fucking terrible.
Oh, dude, sometimes I'm like, do you actually like movies? Like, he is single-handedly, legitimately saving. And it's not just you're a movie fan like me. You're a big fan of the cinema.
Yeah,
Going to the cinema.
Yeah.
He's saving cinema, like legitimately saving mainstream cinema in the past 2 years, because these films are becoming so generic, so boring, so repetitive. People are just not going. I tell you what, the new Mission Impossible film will do massive numbers. And do you know what Tom Cruise will also do? He will ensure that that film goes nowhere near a streaming service for 6 months.
I know, and I'm good
because he is actively protecting cinema. That's what he's doing.
I'm good with
and he's doing it with amazing films.
I'm good with him bringing sheeple like you to the cinema so we can get better films out there. But you're all just fucking flocking around because it's Tom Cruise. Oh, let's fucking follow Tom Cruise. Let's do this.
No, nobody's doing it because it's Tom Cruise. People,
it looks
like
terrible.
Tom Cruise.
It looks awful.
I literally can't get my head around it because the action sequences are so much better than literally everything else. They are. Like, they're just better made, they're better shot. The fact that Tom Cruise is in them allows them to do things that no one else can do.
No, I get that.
The lack of CG means that they actually look real. And that's such a big issue we've had with like the modern blockbuster in the last few years. You have, and we talked about with Indiana Jones, you have all this CG, none of it has an impact. I don't care about it. I watch Mission Impossible, the most recent ones. I'm like, man, he is fucking doing that. You're putting me in the car with him.
I understand all that.
It was the same with Top Gun.
I understand all that, and I'm good with that. The action sequences, you've mentioned the action sequences over and over again. The things you haven't said to me about the Mission Impossibles are the stories are good. The stories are fine, but they're not. They're fine. But for me, I like story. I like something that makes sense. I like moving on.
Yeah, but the whole point of these films as well is that they need to work.
I love how I'm arguing the story fact when we just watched Broken Arrow, but still.
I know. Anyway, we'll argue about this forever. What will we hate? Oh, hates. Here we go. So Samantha Mathis as Terry Carmichael, I think, is legitimately and bizarrely bad in this film. Not only, and again, she's not given much to work with, and the whole park ranger superhero thing is insane. But I also think she's terrible.
You know what's unfortunate as well? Do you know what's unfortunate?
That's okay.
The fact that we've turned around and slated the only female in this film. It is female.
Yeah. And she's, like I said, she isn't given much to work with. And it is bizarre. And I didn't actually notice that until you just said it. But she is indeed the only female in this entire movie, which is bizarre. I
don't even think there's any secretaries in the fucking war room.
I'm
pretty sure it's just Samantha
It's just dudes. Because it's so military, isn't it? And in the 90s in particular, it was still so male-centric, I suppose. But yeah, it doesn't save it from the fact that she's terrible in this film. Number two, and this is one of the biggest issues, is it just never feels as epic as the set pieces and the stunts might suggest. Like you can see, and if you break it down and think about it in any given moment, like there's a lot going on here, and that should be spectacular. But it doesn't work. And as I said, I did have a proper thinker, like, why isn't this having an impact? And I think it does come back, as I've already mentioned, to the fact that the set always feels the same. You're just always in the desert. So it just ends up feeling bland. But it never feels as big as it really should. And three, another major issue is Travolta's criminal change of clothes. When he's in his flight suit with the aviators, the smoke and the coke, he looks so iconic that I'm surprised it doesn't get brought up more. He is so fucking, like, Travolta when he's on it, because don't get me wrong, he can go both ways, of course. He can be an absolute psycho. When he looks the part and you've got him in the right role, he is so goddamn cool and he looks so badass. But the other side of that coin is he looks so bad when he puts on that turtleneck. It's just, and part of that is 90s fashion. What the fuck can you do? But he immediately loses like 8 points of cool the moment he turns into that turtleneck, which is a bit of a shame. But hey ho. So those are my three hates.
So for me, it's Samantha Mathis as well. She just doesn't do well with what she's given, and it's unfortunate that we are slating the only female actress in this, film. Secondly, I hate him. But the fact that he did his character so well is what you're meant to hate. Pritchett.
Yeah, he's not very good.
Fucking hated Pritchett in this film. Bob Gundon did so well with that character. You're meant to hate him, and you do hate him. So
I just think they went too heavy with the kind of like he's out of his element so early. So eventually it sounds like he's just moaning. I think if he's more on board and John Travolta goes increasingly insane, and then he starts kind of, questioning his trust in him. I think it works a lot better. Yeah. But because they go for that like right out of the gate, I'm like, why are you guys even fucking working together? You guys are the worst. It kind of deflates the character a little bit. So by the end, you're just glad to see him get killed, basically.
And third, the henchman. I fucking hated, like, his henchmen were just inept, but then they kept increasing. It's like he had 3 henchmen at the beginning, then he had 2 more at a boat, then he had like 9,000 on a fucking train.
Well, he had to have people to kind of, get the train moving, I suppose. It felt like he said none of this stuff is explained. And again, one of those things I never noticed watching the film until you brought it up. Like, the henchmen are so interchangeable, and at no point I was like, how many henchmen does he have in this film? I'm like, anywhere between 2 and 77. I have no idea.
Insane.
I don't know how many survived. I have no fucking clue. How many were left on the train? Fuck knows.
And how are they all?
At least 6 just running off into the desert. Like, I think we're going to get away with this. Let's just run to Utah. We'll be fine. How
are they all going to go on that little chopper that was able to go on a train platform?
I really don't know. I just don't think they've thought these things out. Like, you had like all those questions about like the buttons on the side of the nuke and like, is the mine deep enough? I don't think, sadly, anyone asked those questions other than you. Certainly nobody asked them when they were making it. Like, I'll be fine. Just get to the next set piece. Don't worry about it.
I'd love to know if there's someone like me in these meetings just sat there. They're going, right, are we all good with Broken Arrow? And there's just that one random guy in the back going, question. No, we're not having questions today.
You'd be great to have in. I mean, don't get me wrong. Maybe you would take it a little bit too far. I always think of like the sandwich situation in Point Break, but it's like you could be the dude who always asks the annoying questions that have to be asked. Yeah. It's like nobody's thought. It's like, wait, does this make any sense? With that window smash, it's like fucking yeah. He's right though. He's fucking right. We need to change it, man. It doesn't make any sense. So in terms of alternate titles for this film, I want to bring up one, and it's not a true alternate title, but Broken Arrow isn't what they say it is in this film.
No, it's not.
A broken arrow is actually a nuclear event that doesn't cause a war. What this is, a missing...
I love this.
Is an empty quiver, which, let's be clear, sounds a lot more like a movie about erectile dysfunction than it does about a missing nuke. So even though it doesn't actually make sense, Broken Arrow, I get it why they didn't call this film Empty Quiver, which is just a horrible name for a movie. I don't know. Like I said, it's a lie. They lie. It like a broken arrow isn't what they say in this film. But the alternative, and again, it might have been you in the back of the room with your hands slowly going up again. Excuse me, I think what you're actually talking about is an empty quiver. And like, dude, we can't call this film fucking Empty Quiver. It sounds so shit. So
Empty Quiver.
Were there any?
They were, I love it. Empty Quiver, sponsored by Viagra. Like,
it's 100% got, and it's got like 1998's like Pele coming out promoting it. It would just be an absolute horror show.
There were a couple of
alternate titles. Sorry, mate.
So we got a few. So Argentina, it was called Arrow Route Code.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't work at all. I don't get that at all.
No, Brazil, The Last Threat.
Yeah, it's about as generic as this movie is for the most part.
Bulgaria, Code Broken Arrow.
That's okay.
Yeah, we got a Code Broken Arrow, so I get that. Finland, I don't get this one because it was the desert, but okay. Broken Arrow, Operation in the Wilderness.
Yeah, that really doesn't make any sense. They're in the desert. I guess is it the wilderness versus the desert? I don't know. I guess it kind of is, but yeah, I'm not having that one.
Lithuania, this may be down to translation, right? But maybe they didn't think it was fully broken, so they went with Fractured Arrow.
yeah, that really doesn't make any sense, because if we go on the assumption that everyone thinks that Broken Arrow means what it means, then why would you suddenly just change it to fractured?
Yeah, like it's not fully broken. It's not a clean break. It's just fractured.
It's fractured. Yeah. We kind of. Well, I guess they know. Everyone kind of. Somebody knows where that is at all times, I suppose.
Lastly, I think Hungary were watching a different film, Gap in the Shield.
Gap in the Shield.
Yeah,
I bet you somebody's really thought about that. Like, they think it's really deep and it just doesn't work at all. So yeah, I'd either go. I mean, let's be clear. We all want to see Empty Quiver, don't we? Really?
Yeah.
But, let's stick with Broken Arrow. Is actually a pretty cool title.
I mean, I want to see a sequel that's either called Fractured Arrow, not quite broken, or Empty Quiver.
empty quiver or fractured quiver. Oh, I just don't like the word quiver. It just sounds lame. I don't know. No action movie should ever have quiver in the title. I don't care what anyone says. Do you have any facts for this film?
I do, yeah. Christian Slater turned down a role in Assassins to work with director John Woo. To be fair, I think that was probably the right move.
Assassins is okay, I suppose, as well.
That's
much
so bit of the road.
Yeah, so is this.
Yeah.
So it's fine. I think you would call this a classic lateral step.
Yeah.
Nothing gained, nothing lost.
Christian Slater did almost all of his own stunts, which moves on to, in preparation for the stunts, he gave up smoking. So I'm guessing John Travolta wanted to take up all of the smoking.
Yeah, successfully so. The fact of the matter is, right, smoking is super bad for you, but in the right hands, I'm sorry, it does look cool. It does look cool. And it happens with movies every so often. Like, I very rarely smoke anymore. And for the most part, that's absolutely fine with me. But every so often I watch somebody, and it'll always be a movie. Somebody will make smoking look cool. And I'll be like, oh, God. Like, I can't watch Mad Men. All I want to do is get pissed and smoke.
Yeah.
But yeah. Never mind. And John Travolta's like that in this. Like, not many people, and you mentioned earlier, could pull off the smoking the way he does with his fingers spread and like his hand over his face. But he kind of does in this film because he's John Travolta. But I am fully aware that I am not 1996 John Travolta, so I can't be doing that.
John Woo cast Samantha Mathis and Christian Slater by putting photos of them together and deciding they fit. And they had nobody in that meeting room putting their hand up going, they used to date and I think they broke up quite badly.
That'd be Rob again. That's why we need Rob in the room. He would have been like, I've done my research. I've done my due diligence. It's going to make it awkward, guys. You should get Jennifer Aniston. I'm telling you.
For the fight scenes, Christian Slater and John Travolta trained with former boxing champ Carlos Palomino.
Yeah. It doesn't show on screen, sadly.
No. To promote the film, the publicity unit sent sunglasses resembling the ones worn by John Travolta to media outlets. The sunglasses had the Broken Arrow logo printed on the lower left lens. So again, can you imagine if I had empty quiver? Just now you're advertising the fact you've got an empty quiver.
But that's the thing. I think they knew they had something cool because, you think about, obviously, The Aviators, you think of Tom Cruise. Sorry to bring him back up again, but, they had a massive impact on Top Gun. I mean, Aviator sales went through the roof after that. And they must have seen sequences with John Travolta and be like, oh, man, he can make them iconic again. It's just the film's not good enough, sadly, which is a bit of a shame. But like you say, it is better with Broken Arrow on them, admittedly, than Empty Quiver, that's for sure.
I've just decided empty quiver doesn't mean you've got erectile problems. Empty quiver means you're shooting blanks.
Yeah, well, it can mean either. That's the beauty of Empty Quiver. It's something sexual and it's not good, put it that way.
John Travolta formed a close friendship with John Woo while filming.
Well, it showed.
Yeah.
Again, I think John Woo probably saw him and was like, this is the performance I want. This is where I'm going. And yeah, fantastic.
We didn't mention this, right? During the final few blows of the last fight, as Hale is punching and kicking, growls and roars of large cats can be heard. Did you hear that when he was fighting?
I didn't notice that. Yeah. Nope.
It was Travolta's idea to play Deacon's character as larger than life. Well, we knew that anyway. After the surprise success of Speed, Graham Yost's script for this film became a hot commodity, along with that of The Flood, which became Hard Rain, and was optioned by 20th Century Fox. It was greenlit instantly by the studio once they were able to get Travolta to star. Travolta became a bankable movie star again after Pulp Fiction.
Well, you got this, didn't you? It was like all of the, after Die Hard, you had a bunch of Die Hard likes. And similarly, and because none of them were particularly successful, you had a lot of Speed likes, and this isn't exactly the same, but, off the back of that, like, can we get like a high concept, really kinetic action film kind of out there, which is going to basically come close to matching Speed, and no movies did. In the same way that I think some films came closer to matching Die Hard. Like, Die Hard's a better movie than Speed, but you even more recently, you still have that. We mentioned, what was it, the year when The Raid and Dread were released, and both of them were just Die Hard in a building. Get upstairs. That's it. And I know Die Hard. Just to be clear, I'm aware that Die Hard is also Die Hard in a building, but it had that same simplistic vibe kind of thing, But hey ho. But yeah, it's a shame that none of these films really worked. And Christian Slater was in both, and not great.
It's good to know there's a meme. There's a me that works for the Trains magazine.
Oh, fantastic.
According to Trains magazine, the train chase scene was actually filmed on the Short Line Central Montana Rail, which of course is not in Utah or Colorado. There is no real rail company called National Regional. You just got some guy just keyboard warrioring the fuck out of this. Just like, hang on now.
Oh, yeah. Whoa. This doesn't make sense one fucking bit. I'll tell you about trains, goddammit. See, even you wouldn't pick that up. Like, that is really deep in the weeds. You know, you've got to be a train guy, don't you?
That's it. Yeah, it's just all about what the train is now, what the things that we don't usually care about.
We don't give a fuck about. In terms of legacy, as I said, it's definitely a warm-up for Face Off, a superior film, and let's be clear, John Woo's best Western film, at least. I mentioned earlier one of Travolta's biggest performances, if not the biggest performance. He is. If you haven't watched this film for a long time, it is really worth going back to, for all of our criticisms, going back just to see John Travolta in this film. It had a solid, if unspectacular box office, 150 million US off a 50 budget. So,
I mean, it's a success.
I know that's always just about.
Back in '96, it's a success. 150 on a budget of 50.
Yeah, but it is a success. I'm just saying it's not a massive success because you've always got to double the budget for advertising. You know, those sunglasses they hand out with sexual quiver written on the front. You know, they don't come free.
Oh my God! No, that's a name for a band.
Sexual quiver.
That'd
be pretty good. But no, like we are kind of arguing over the point here. It was a hit. It wasn't a massive hit, but it was a hit. I know we've had disagreements on this, but I do really think this was like the end of Slater as a Hollywood leading man. I mean, you mentioned Hard Rain in '98. That didn't really land either. There's 3,000 Miles to Graceland. And it's just
you can't really count 3,000 Miles to Graceland, man, because I think he dies in the first 15 minutes of that film.
Yeah, I'm just talking about like big films he was in because
I like that film, mind.
Yeah, no, I don't quite like that film, but they were pushing him. It was this really interesting, like kind of teen, early 20s actor at the late 80s, early 90s. They pushed him in the wrong direction. They pushed him towards leading man, and I know we have disagreements on how successful it was in this film. Fundamentally, it just didn't really work because I think, as I said, he's just a character actor who just happens to be handsome. And it's obviously been later in his career, he's been able to lean more into that. Like, you know, one of his best performances around that time was Interview with a Vampire. And he's got one of those like weird little roles rather than just leading man kind of thing. So, yeah, I really did think this was the beginning of the end, as I said, of the whole experiment of Slater as a traditional 90s action leading man. You know, you think about in the same way, because they were obviously pushing for different styles of leading men in action roles. You know, we'd come out of the 80s and we were used to Stallone, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Schwarzenegger, all that jazz. And in the 90s, they wanted to go more for an everyman. And they tried with Slater, it didn't work. Then they tried with Cage, and it did work. You know, again, an interesting actor, but he was able to convince as an action star in a way I don't think Slater ever did. And it was also arguably the end of the Samantha Mathis leading lady experiment. There was a thing called Love in '93, where she was actually the lead alongside River Phoenix and Sandra Bullock. And she's the lead of that film. Not Sandra Bullock, not River Phoenix, it's Samantha Mathis. But admittedly, you know, it just didn't quite work out. And a big part of that, obviously, was I don't want to blame this when Super Mario Brothers existed. You know, that's going to derail most people's careers, sadly.
You know, she disappeared for a long time. I don't remember seeing her in much. The last thing I remember seeing her in was the Under the Dome TV show.
The Stephen King one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've not watched that because after reading the book, as much as I love the book, it's a big ass book, man. And
it's big book.
I don't need more of this in life. The only thing I'd be interested, I'm not sure if that show ever reached its conclusion, because I assume it'd be over a number of seasons, if they went for the ending. Because the ending to the book is a big swing, to say the least. And I'm just not sure if they would have gone that way with the TV show. But
she's coming up in an untitled Pet Cemetery project.
Well, we'll see how that goes.
Pet Cemetery Project. So not a sequel, maybe a spin-off.
Would it be a TV? It'd have to be a TV because they've done the movie, and the movie was pretty good and about as true to the book as you can get.
I think it's a film. It's got Pam Grier. It's got the kid from E.T., Henry Thomas.
I don't know. That sounds like straight to DVD stuff. Yeah. Anyway, the other thing in terms of its legacy, and what's maybe most famous for, is the exceptional score by Hans Zimmer, which will lead us directly into said score soundtrack section. So, I mean, the whole score is exceptional. But the off-use, I think it's called Rope-a-Dope, the track, has subsequently been used on numerous other movies, such as Speed 2, and most famously as Dewey's theme in Scream. But the weird thing is, if you haven't read about it beforehand, you start watch this film, you're like, why does this fucking score sound so familiar? Yeah. And it's because it has popped up in a bunch of other movies. And it's bizarre because it's probably more famous for Scream 2 at this point, but it's better utilized here.
Yeah.
And it's heavily utilized. Like I said, the whole score by Hans Zimmer is really good. And I think it's held up as one of the best 90s action scores, full stop. But out of the score, it's that tune in particular which really stands out. Like you said, you have it as your ringtone, don't you, on your phone? So
it's my text. And my phone is always on silent, but if it's never on silent, I get surprised because if somebody texts me, that pops up. Yeah,
that's badass. And it's never better used than when it's like played over just John Travolta looking cool, as I said earlier in the movie in particular. In terms of video games, there is a Broken Arrow video game, but it's 2023 real-time modern warfare tactics game with nothing at all to do with this movie. But just in case you did look up, there is a Broken Arrow video game. There is a video game called Broken Arrow, but it has nothing to do with the movie. When I was thinking of a modern game, because Travolta is bonkers in this film, I was thinking a sequel in which Deke inexplicably survives his injuries, despite all the, exploding and stuff, and is forced to work alongside Hale to take down a terrorist cell working out of North Carolina by the IO Interactive team responsible for 2007's largely underrated Kane and Lynch. I'm not sure if you remember the Kane and Lynch games. They were it was most famous for taking, the opening looked like Heat. It basically ripped off Heat, essentially. Yeah. But I was just like, set in like somewhere weird in America. If we're going from Utah, let's go to North Carolina. But basically, I want to get those two back together. And it's like, some kind of situation where John Travolta's character is forced to play by the rules, but you're always like, is he going to go off the rails? Obviously, he will at some point. But that's what I would like to see. And basically, I just wanted to bring up Kane and Lynch because it's a video game I've not come across for a long, long time. But I always used to enjoy it. The sequel was even better, but by that point, nobody gave a shit, sadly.
So I'll go with you on that. I like the idea of maybe bringing them back and teaming them up and going up against the bigger bads, and you've got one who's a bit more out of control than the other.
They're kind of like they're forced to work together despite the fact that he knows he's a psycho.
I would probably go with EA did it. EA Montreal did it, and Army of Two.
Oh, I remember that game. Yeah. Another game which didn't kind of like Kane and Lynch, and it was around the same period, like early 360 PS3 period, where it had a good concept. And it didn't quite, and the sequel was better, but because the first game didn't really land, very similar to Kane and Lynch. It meant that nobody really went out and bought the sequel, which was a bit of a shame because the sequel.
Although, to be fair, looking at this, it had 3 games.
Was there a third? Oh, there was a third one.
The Devil's Cartel. Yeah.
I played that one as well. I just totally forgot about it.
Yeah, so again, that's
perfectly suited to this because, again, yours is probably better suited because it's quite a generic game for quite a generic movie, if truth be told. So let's go with your one. But as to whether they're going to make, and I know they are making a Broken Arrow, they've just made a Broken Arrow game, but one based on the John Woo movie, I don't think it's going to fucking happen, and I'm absolutely fine with that.
Yeah.
In terms of next week, well, I've ruined it.
Scores and recommendations.
Oh yeah, shit. Scores and well, I'm not recommending this film. No way. In terms of a score, and I hate to use this because this is Rob's scoring system and not mine, but it's a 2.5. It really is. I can't give it a 3. If I was forced to pick 2 or 3, I would round down and I'd give it a 2.
Yeah.
As I said, the good stuff, i.e. Travolta score, Woo, it's very good. But the rest of the film is so incredibly bang average that I was like halfway through, I was just like, man, if John Travolta was in this film, it would just be so fucking boring. So yeah, I'm going to give it a 2.5. If that's okay. And I hate to do that.
Well, I don't want you to ask me. I'm the king of
I know, because I always bitch and moan about that. But this is one of those films, like, it really is a 2-star film, but I can't give it a 2-star film when I enjoy Travolta.
To be fair, right, in this film. I knew you'd break. I mean, we're 100 odd episodes in. I knew one point you'd break. I would never put money that you would break on Broken Arrow.
But I know. It's absolutely insane. But as I said, I just felt so conflicted because I was talking to my wife about this after we finished watching it, and we were both like, man, that is a 2-star film. But I was like, but the soundtrack and Travolta, they're so badass. So I feel like it needs that at least half point or at least a mentioning. But if I'm going to force myself, I'm going to say 2 stars. Sadly.
Yeah. It's I would recommend it, and it's a 3.
You'd recommend this?
Yeah, I would recommend it. I enjoy it. I still like it. I'll probably watch it again. I'll watch this over fucking Empire any day. So, I mean, that's my...
Settle down, buddy. I mean, like, you're saying that like with such confidence that you're actually almost convincing me. Now, I would actually say that some people should watch this film, and again, it keeps coming back to him because John Travolta is so fucking batshit in this film that I think people should watch it. But it would come with a caveat that the rest of the film around it is a little bit whatever. But yeah, he does elevate very mediocre material. So yeah, 2.5. I'm sticking with it.
So basically 2.5, maybe recommend, and I will recommend for a 3.
Yeah. But we're in and around the same ballpark, basically. You know, it's like, you know, you're a bit warmer on Christian Slater, stuff like that. You know, but we're not like kind of.
No, we're not a million miles away. I think this lately our track record hasn't been good of agreeing or disagreeing. So
in fairness, we did have a whole section where we argued pretty strongly about Rambo 2 versus Rambo 1 and Tom Cruise, but anytime we bring up Tom Cruise, of course, we're going to argue.
I mean, what I love the fact is when I pick a Tom Cruise film, it is going to be Legend.
Oh, fucking of all the films.
Right. Anyway, I'm so surprised. What are we covering next week?
I know. Well, that is the thing. I mean, that'll give us the opportunity to maybe argue next week. But like you said, you're not sure if you've seen Rambo 3. And I have to believe that if you'd seen Rambo 3, you would remember that you've seen Rambo 3.
Yeah.
Because it is insane. It really is. It's very much on that trajectory of like Rambo 1 is like, you know, this really grounded, and we did the podcast on First Blood. It's this really, you know, in many respects, it's a 70s film. It was written in the 70s. It wasn't filmed until the 80s, but it feels, the way it's shot, the way it's acted, it feels like a 70s movie, 1 foot very much in reality. Rambo 2 abandons all that because, as we mentioned again on previous podcasts, the 80s as we know it didn't actually start until around 1983, 1984. Yeah. And it started with this. Rambo 2 ushered in the start of the 80s period as we remember it. But then Rambo 3 just basically takes that, adds another 100 million of budget and goes, oh, God, that was a hiccup, goes absolutely insane with it. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what you think of this film, especially if you're a fan of Rambo 2.
I just want to say, I hope you know you've probably pissed off or alienated a few listeners. Because every time you mention Superman the movie, we get some comments going, great, can't wait, oh, looking forward to it. And you've told people now we were going to do Superman, but now we're replacing it for Rambo 3.
Oh, man, until like 30 minutes ago, we were totally doing Superman the movie, but now we're doing Rambo 3. It just seems to be perfect. And basically, I just want to share the poster. I love the poster for Rambo 3. Just giant, caked in oil Sylvester Stallone. Like there's a whole army below him, but all anyone wants to see is Stallone and the writing. It's like him at his peak, you know, it's just like, oh, this is all about me. I'm against Schwarzenegger. I have to be all over this poster. And it kind of pulls
people
it off.
Going, what the fuck are you doing?
I know.
Do you know what that sounds like? That sounds like a Rob move. I think you've done a Rob move.
It does feel a little bit like a Rob move. But yeah, we're sticking with it. But anyway, thank you. God bless you for sticking with us as we went back and looked at 1996's Broken Arrow. But please do join us next week for apparently not Superman the movie. No, we're going to go back and watch Sylvester Stallone's 80s masterpiece, Rambo 3. I say that with my tongue very much in cheek.
We don't usually do this, but we have talked about the next couple of films. And I think this is ushering in the little bit of action. We got an action...
Yeah, we've got quite a few action movies coming out. So the Rambo 3 thing probably makes sense. We're on a bit of a roll now with actuals. And obviously we kind of did that with the Nick Cage thing, but those were themed around Nick Cage. These are just action movies, and we've got quite a few in the pipeline, but they're all really fun ones. And I think,
looking forward to them. I mean, I always
this one. I'm looking forward to going back and rewatching it, but I'm super interested to get your opinion on this. Like I said, I am genuinely amazed that you haven't seen Rambo 3, especially as you had First Blood Part 2 on VHS, and it seems to have played a big part in your youth that you never thought maybe I should watch Rambo 3 next.
I don't know why I've never gone back to watch Rambo 3.
Yeah, that's weird.
I
assume after watching Rocky 2, you went and watched Rocky 3 for...
The other VHS that I had was Mad Max, Mad Max 2.
Well, that's okay. Mad Max 2 is the best one.
But I went back and watched Mad Max 1, but it took me No. I went back and watched Mad Max 3, but it took me a long time to actually watch the original.
Yeah, so, that's a tougher sell though, because that was filmed that was really an Australian film. It didn't have that Hollywood impact. And I know the other films are Australian as well, but it was such a low budget film. But because I did the exact same as you. I watched Fury Road, then I went to Thunderdome, and then I was like, you're exactly the same as you. It took me a long time to convince myself that, okay, I need to go back.
Sorry, you said Fury Road. Did you mean Road Warrior?
Oh, Road Warrior. Sorry, I apologize.
Sorry.
Fury Road's the fucking best.
Fury Road is fucking...
That's the best one.
You know, if we were going to do I mean, will have to cover Mad Max at some point, but we will probably have to end with Fury Road, which is one of the latest films we've ever done, because Fury Road is fucking fantastic.
See, now we've mentioned, I am amazed that, one, we haven't done Mad Max, but in our internet conversations where we've talked about the films we want to do next, we have not brought up Mad Max once. Mad Max was a huge part of my childhood, and I think in particular, don't get me wrong, The Road Warrior is a really good movie. I think it'd be so much fun to go back and watch Thunderdome, because that film is fucking. But I love the Road Warrior to me, to Mad Max to me, is what Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is to Indiana Jones. You go back and watch the film. I love the first half of that film.
Yeah.
But the moment he goes into the desert, I hate the second half of that movie.
What? Thunderdome.
Thunderdome. Yeah. In the first half, when fucking they're actually fighting in the ring, two shall enter, one shall leave, all that jazz. He's got the mullet, everything. I'm fucking on board. I love that.
Yeah.
But the moment they put that silly hat on him and send him off into the desert, I hate the rest of that film, sadly. But it is what it is. But anyway, sorry, we're talking about other movies.
I mean, we've said goodbye about 3 times, so cheers.
Yeah, but that is one thing. 120 episodes in, we have not figured out how to end this podcast. We never have. We always say a whole bunch of shit. I'm talking, thanks for listening to this. You start blurting something out about Tom Cruise, and then we just go, goodbye. And that's what we're going to do again. So yeah, thanks for listening. Bye. Cheers, guys.
Dude, we're never going to end it properly. I said something else again. Cheers, guys. Exactly. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
And I always say we'll see you next week, and I never fucking see anybody.
Yeah, we fucked it. We fucked it again. We'll fuck it every week. It's just the way it ends. Never mind.
Cheers, guys.
Bye. Oh, and before we forget, here is Rob with all the finer details. Got to get through those, dude.
Yeah, so basically you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at HeyYouGuys80s. We're also on email at HeyYouGuys80s@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us any recommendations, any corrections or omissions we may have missed from any of the films that we've covered. Just get them in. And also, if you could, please leave us some 5-star reviews. That would really help us. And we'd like to thank, as always, Darry Fletcher at Darry Doodles for the fantastic artwork that we're now producing. Thanks for that, mate.
Cheers, Darry.
Yeah. And thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week.
Cheers. Bye.